My name is Ursie Joyner, Ersiejoyner. To put the whole story into context, this isn't going to be a he say she say thing in regards to what Mr. Cobb said versus what we're saying. All I can say is that initially on the day of the murder, it was very difficult talking to Mr. Cobbs. He did not initially want to talk to us. In fact, when Sergeant Longmire was able to finally secure a meeting with him hours after the murder, Mr. Cobb chose to conduct this interview with his attorney present. Adding to that, he was not very free in regards to offering up a lot of information or any information in regards to computer files or stories that Mr. Baily was working on.
What would Chauncey do if Chauncey were able to carry this story? He would say, fine, write about me, but there's 150 others who got killed too.
I sat here and watched Paul being interviewed in this room by people who were coming through, and he was going from being downcast and sad and crying at various times. And he sat here and talked to everybody as well as he could and was open and honest with people. And suffering, tremendous suffering, because someone that he knows, someone that he knew had been killed in such a horrible way.
He was coming from the east, I was coming from the west, and he got shot while I was in transit. When I got to the office, the police called and said that they wanted me to provide next of kin information. They said, we have someone that works for you who is here on the ground. And he said, do you know a Chauncey Baily? And I said, yes, he's probably there covering it. And the officer said, he won't be covering anymore. The TV cameras and others met me as I was coming out of the building. We went to the scene. I encountered a gentleman who had claimed he was a witness to the shooting. And he was trying to get attention because he was concerned that no one would listen to him. I immediately said, well, let me get a police officer here, and I'll take you over there, and I will help you get an audience with a police officer. I said, that's no problem.
Has everybody had a chance to review the 10 questions that were submitted? I'll give you the list of questions we're going to answer. Question number 3, which I'm not going to respond to. Paul Cobb said that Sergeant Derwin Longmire refused to speak to a man at the scene who said he witnessed the murder. Is that true? Has police already interviewed this man? Question number 4.
I went over to his car with this gentleman, and Longmire sped off in a huff. And all the other media was there observing it, like, wonder what that was about. It was about 15 minutes later that I came back to the office, and I called the chief, Chief Tucker, and I told him what I had encountered and that I wanted an officer to take our statement. I thought that out of protocol, they ought to at least take a statement from the employees and the employment place of Chauncey, since we are the ones who were part of the last to see him alive and to have worked with him on a daily basis. Officer Longmire did arrive here in this room at the same table.
Sergeant Longmire had already made up his mind that the focus was on the bakery. He said, unless I find that there is some wife or some personal relationship that he's been involved in, my focus is the bakery. He did not want to hear from anyone in the room that there were other possible suspects or possible avenues for investigation.
We received that information early on in the homicide investigation. Okay, I'm not going to get into specifics on what time or location or what date, but just say for the record that it was early in the investigation that information was provided to us, or we developed, that indicated members of the bakery was involved in the murder.
So that the police department has information that your Black Muslim bakery has been committing those kinds of crimes, they should go after that, but they can't put the onus on Paul Cobb as a person who has this information and is not providing it. He doesn't have it.
When he asked me the question, were there any controversial topics or subjects that Chauncey was working on? Could we give him an account? And the first thing that came out of my mouth was he was investigating the police.
I received this information from one of your colleagues in the media. Immediately after we received the information, we had a first name that we had been doing some preliminary investigation. This information was in fact followed up on through our internal affairs investigation and through our investigative process. There was no other information has been provided to us that would allow us to continue on any further with this information. However, if that information is still available, we would very much like to receive that and pursue an investigation into whether or not officers at the Oakland Police Department had been involved in any kind of police misconduct or corruption.
What was that based on? Was that based on information that you received from Mr. Cobb?
No, this is information I received from one of your colleagues in the media, that one of Chauncey's stories was that an Oakland police officer was involved in, with the bakery with some corruption.
While we were offering our points of view and sort of thinking out loud what might have happened, the officer said, look, all these theories or all these suggestions, we know what happened. And what happened was that Chauncey Baily, and he used these two words, was stalked and targeted.
Question number 2, which I am not going to respond to. How were you able to say conclusively at 10 a.m. at the Post, August 2nd, that Chauncey Baily had been stalked and targeted? Please explain. Question number...
The paper was being put to bed that very night, and they had to start changes. They actually changed the paper. Paul sat here while he was doing interviews. But he was also suffering, and in the time since then, there's a suffering. But that's also the impact of someone who was playing an important role in the paper, no longer here. He actually did work, and now someone else has to take that load.
Chauncey, as you know, we often say, was the hardest working man in journalism. And he was an old-fashioned shoe leather journalist that went to any and every meeting he could, and those that you wouldn't dream of that he would go to.
We are used to hate in the black community. We can handle hate in the black community. And let me say right here, no one hates black folks more than black folks. We are 12% of the population. We do 50% of the murders. 95% of the murders against blacks are by other blacks. You're in a city that's lost more African Americans since 1990 than any other city in the United States. There's some institutional things that's happening. But don't get sidetracked on dealing with individuals and making this some kind of a soap opera that the media can cover as a soap opera. It's a lot deeper than that.